Hey, it's Kerry with Divine Radiance. Welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to do a video on how to create your heaven on earth by doing nothing. And guess what? That is actually how we create our heaven on earth, is by doing nothing, because we already are everything. The problem is we forgot that, right? So the ego is about doing. The ego thinks we need to do more, be more, become more. That's the ego's agenda. But the soul already knows what the soul is, which is a perfect image of God, right? So the soul knows we don't have to do anything. The ego is the one that is always about doing, keeping busy, trying to learn more, trying to be more. And really, the idea for the ego is to keep you away from God, actually. So it's trying to keep you so busy that you stay away, because there's two paths that you can follow, right? There's two choices you make every moment of the day that leave you on very different paths. There's the ego path or the soul path, also known as the fear path or the love path, or the hell path or the heaven path, or bondage path or freedom path. Those are your options. Those are the two. That's it. And you might say, well, of course I want the heaven path, right? The hell path isn't really hell as we think of it, right? The ego is all about being okay, right? The ego is not about suffering and having things be bad. It's about making things okay, making things tolerable, just being content. You know, a lot of people in their lives are pretty content. Their lives are okay. That's the path of the ego. And the ego won't tell you that your other alternative is heaven. Yes, heaven, meaning unabashed joy and happiness and bliss and rapture. The ego will tell you, and it's probably telling you right now, oh, that's not possible. That's not how life is supposed to be. That's the ego's story that it tells you, to keep you on the path of the ego, to keep you on the hell path, to keep you on the path that I say, oh, everything's okay, right? One of the perfect stories that the ego says is like, well, we have it so much better than other people. We can't complain. There's people that don't have a house, who don't eat, who don't have this. So that's how the ego keeps you on that path of being okay. Like, well, we can't really complain. Look, we're doing pretty good. Even though the alternative is heaven. And the ego's job, the ego's function, is to keep you away from that path of God, path of heaven. That's the ego's main function, is to keep you away. So it keeps you busy, it keeps you on the hamster wheel, it keeps you doing things like, oh, we got to stay busy, oh, we got to work out, oh, we got to go to work so we can pay bills and we can buy more stuff and go out drinking and be okay. To make things tolerable, to make things okay. That is the ego's function. So in order to get on the path of heaven, when I say you don't have to do anything, that's actually the case. So, because think of what the soul is, right? The soul is made in the image of God. And God created the cosmos by a thought. Okay, God didn't toil to produce these things, right? God, through consciousness, said, let there be light, and there was light. Let there be, and there was. Okay, if we're made in the image of that, then that is how easy it is for us to create. It's the ego that tells you you have to do, right? Because remember, it wants to keep you busy. So the soul's path is a very easy path. It's about receiving. It's about just being who you already are, which is a perfect image of God, a child of God. So you don't really have to do anything. However, you do need to surrender. So now remember, the ego's main tools to keep you on that path are fear, lack, doubt, scarcity, limits, worry. Those are all the tools of the ego. Oh, you're going to not pay your mortgage if you don't do this job. Like, that's how the ego works, right? To keep you in line, to keep you in bondage, to keep you on this path of being okay. Whereas the soul just knows. So basically what we're trying to do is just surrender over. Anytime fear comes up, anytime worry or doubt, recognize that that can't be truth. Because to God and to the soul, that is not. That's only of the ego, which is the complete polar opposite of God, love, joy. Okay, so anytime you're in fear and you start to think of that, the only thing you have to do, which really isn't doing anything, is surrender it over to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is our teacher, our guide. The Holy Spirit is a perfect extension of God, made because of the ego. Because the ego became so strong in separation. Well, I'm a separate person. My mind is just about me. That's the ego, which isn't truth. The truth is you are completely connected with God, with Source, and with every other being on earth. You're never alone. Through your mind, you can connect with everyone, but the ego keeps you separate, keeps you alone, keeps you in bondage, right? So God's answer to the ego is the Holy Spirit, which is a perfect extension of God, which is our teacher and guide to help you reunite with the truth, which is that you are already one with God and one with all your brothers and sisters. We are all one. That's the truth. And the Holy Spirit's function is our teacher and guide to get us back to that. But because we have free will, the ego can't just interject. The Holy Spirit can't just make us follow this path to heaven. We have free will. That's the caveat to all this. So the only thing we actually have to do is just surrender it over to the Holy Spirit. Say, Holy Spirit, I am in fear right now. I am doubting myself. Will you show me the truth? By doing that, you are allowing the relationship with the Holy Spirit to come into you. And now the Holy Spirit can do its function, which is to be your guide and teacher back to heaven, back to God. And he cannot fail, right? If that's God's will for the Holy Spirit, you think it can fail? No. But I guarantee you there's egos out there, and listen to your ego, you'll be, oh, well, that won't work for me. Right? The ego is one of its favorite tools, or things that it says is there's something inherently wrong with me. That's how the ego keeps you in bondage. Right? There's something wrong with me. This won't happen to me just because this lady is telling me this on YouTube. Right? But that's not truth. Don't listen to that. Okay, that's just the ego's way of having you not play along with us, because it doesn't, remember, the ego does not want you to go on the heaven path because it doesn't exist there. It has no power, it has no control on the heaven path. So most minds are commanded by the ego. So the ego, as tricky as it is, even if you've had a spiritual awakening, the ego is still commanding the ship. It's still driving you towards being tolerable and okay. If you are not experiencing 100% bliss and happiness, then the ego is still there. It's still in play. And you have to surrender. So while you're doing this, so like I said, you just need to be willing. You need to give the permission to the Holy Spirit. And then you just need a little bit of faith. You don't need a lot of faith, right? Jesus' favorite term, pretty much he says throughout the New Testament, is a mustard seed size of faith, which is obviously a very small amount. That is all you need. Even just saying, you know what, this lady said it on YouTube, so I'm going to just believe her. You don't need a lot of faith, and you don't need to understand how it works. Okay, be very clear about that. You don't need to understand. Your mind's going to try to figure it out. But remember, that's your ego-driven mind, and will talk you out of it. So you don't need to understand how it works. You just need to understand that that's the Holy Spirit's function, and it will not fail, because that's God's will for it and the function he gave it. So it will not fail. But all you have to do is be aware every time anything fearful, hateful, jealousy, lack, limits, anytime anything like that comes up, you surrender. So what this does over time is the ego loses its power over you. because that's its tool. This fear-based thinking is the ego's tool to keep you in bondage. But if every time you get scared or feel like you're in any negative state and you surrender it over to the Holy Spirit and say, listen, I am fearful right now. I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills, or I'm not happy in this relationship, or whatever it is, whatever. You give it to the Holy Spirit and you just know that everything's going to be okay, and the Holy Spirit is on it and going to figure it out because that's his function. You don't need to dispel the fear. That is the Holy Spirit's function, is to do that for you. You don't have to get to that place first. You hand it over to the Holy Spirit and be like, okay, and now I'm just going to live knowing that it's all going to be okay. And over time, it's not going to happen right away. But over time, all of a sudden, the ego doesn't have its main tool. It doesn't have that tool to make you scared, to keep you in bondage. It loses its power over you. And now the soul can start taking over the mind, because you're going to start seeing these miracles happen as you allow the Holy Spirit to work its way through you, because you've given it permission to work on your behalf. And you're going to start seeing, and then the soul will start taking over the mind. So, and then all of a sudden you're on the path to heaven on earth. You're on the path to creating your heaven on earth by doing nothing. And you're going to say, that sounds too easy, right? That's the ego. The ego is going to say, oh, that just sounds too easy. Remember, doing is something of the ego. Anything that attaches you to the body is the ego. So, and the ego's prime, motivation or whatnot is temporary pleasure, followed by pain usually. So the ego will always drive you towards things that are temporarily happy, right? Because the suffering, if you're actually suffering, that's a prod to help you to remember that there's a choice. So the ego doesn't actually want you to suffer too much, but it wants to keep you on this kind of like, okay, tolerable life path so that you don't make any huge changes, which is obviously to get you on the path of God. So, and back on the path to heaven, and then creating your heaven on earth. So this is how a soul works. So a soul is broken off as an extension of God, but then it's encased in a body. So it's encased in a causal body first. So you have the soul, which is everything, right? So this is an individualized aspect of God, which is the soul, right? So then it's put into a causal body, which is a little restricting, but not very much, okay? But it's containing the soul. Then it's put into an astral body, which is a little more confining and restricting, but it's still light and love. But then it's put into a physical body. Okay, the physical body is extremely limiting, restricting, constricting, and really hard on the soul. And so basically your soul becomes imprisoned over time, because then the ego, your soul starts identifying with the limits of the body. And so in that limitation, it's almost like the soul just forgets who it is, where we came from, where we were before. We are just so identified with the limits of the body and fear and all of these things that don't actually really exist. They're all just part of the ego, the darkness, Satan, the devil. All of that is tied into the serpent, right? Keeping you in this illusion, like that money is so important, right? That's all part of the illusion that the ego uses to keep you here, to keep you in this confined, keep the soul trapped. And the soul wants to remember. So the soul is when you this might resonate with you. If you feel it resonating in your heart area, that is your soul saying yes, yes. Your mind is your ego, so your mind will talk you out of it. So be very wary, but listen to what's in your heart. If it's resonating as truth to you, that is your soul letting you know, yes, let's do this, let's try this. And that's how you know the difference, because the mind will talk you out of it. The mind will never go towards the path of heaven, right? Never. The ego won't. So you need to get the soul to be in command of the mind, which takes time. It takes effort. It takes surrendering over and over and over again until the ego loses his power over your mind. And so that is how you start creating your heaven on earth, by doing nothing. You don't actually have to do. So things I would recommend to help you along your journey, things that I've been doing, A Course in Miracles, which takes about a year. You do one lesson a day in the student section, and then you read like a section every day for about a year. But that will help you transcend your ego, help you lose this power, as well as Paramahansa Yogananda's Self-Realization Fellowship Home Study. He has a home study, takes 9 months, where you get new lessons every 2 weeks sent to your house. It's $90 for the whole 9 months. That also, both of their goals is help you to transcend the ego and connect you with Christ consciousness, to connect you on the heaven path so that you can create your heaven on earth. So I highly recommend doing one or both of those to help you, but you don't have to. Remember, you don't have to do anything, but it is helpful to do that. In A Course in Miracles, they say the only appropriate use of time is to find God. That if you're doing other things, it's actually just wasting your time. And that's the ego, trying to keep you trapped in this illusion that this is important. When really the object of life is to find God, is to reunite, to remember your soul's essence, who you truly are. That is. So any time spent doing that is time well spent. So even if you dedicate an hour a day, it's way better than working out or whatever else that you're doing that keeps you identified with the body. So I hope that helps. If you have questions, let me know. I'm going to be starting to do more videos, I think. There's a few that I have in mind that I'll be doing, so please subscribe. All the support is always appreciated. Any comments or likes, always appreciated. Have a very, very blessed day.